Hello, friends. Warm welcome to the next session in the Iesus Deus series. I'm Dr. David Litwa, and I am going to be taking you through an overview of Chapter 2 today. For those of you interested in the overview of Chapter 1, that is also available, as well as the introduction, and I will be going through chapter by chapter. Again, this series is only meant as a kind of teaser to get people introduced to the book and hopefully to encourage them to pick it up. And I will be happy to answer any and all questions on the Patreon on the You Are a God tier. So follow up, leave comments and a like, and let's get moving. I'll just remind everybody of the thesis of the book, namely that early Christians deified Jesus in their literature for the same reason that other ancient Mediterranean peoples deified their heroes, rulers, and benefactors. Jesus was, in this sense, hardly unique, and it's important to recognize that and to recognize the logic of what I consider to be the discursive or literary deification of Jesus, that is, the full-on description of Jesus as a divine being. And in chapter 1, we begin with Jesus's very first experience of human life, which is his conception and birth. Today, of course, we'll be looking at chapter 2, From Where Is This Child Born? Divine Children in the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. For those of you who don't know this work, you're going to absolutely love it, and I will shortly give you all the data you need to go find this title and read it for yourself. But for now, I turn to the chapter Thesis. Now, there's been lots of studies on the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, both before my 2014 book and after it. And I try to situate myself into that conversation. There are, in scholarship, basically two approaches, depending on whether you want to look at Hellenic comparanda or more Judaic comparanda. And there are studies trying to situate the behavior of Jesus as simply explainable due to his status as a child. There are studies trying to compare him with Jewish heroes like Honi the Circle Drawer and others. And there are studies like mine, where I'm trying to bring to the table more Hellenic comparanda to show that Christians weren't necessarily reading, handbooks of Greek mythology like we do. They didn't need to. They had those stories ingrained in them as part of the cultural common coin of the day. So in terms of judging their frameworks and their presuppositions and what they considered to be plausible about how a god would behave, and in particular a god as a child would behave, they had lots of data to work with. So my thesis is that in the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, the young Jesus acted pretty much like other Greco-Roman deities did as children or young people. That is, they defended their honor. And as one of my teachers said to me, when gods defend their honor, if you insult them, they will throw a nuclear bomb back at you. And this is very much what happens in the case of Jesus. He is not your typical Dennis the Menace enfant terrible. He is a horror show. I mean, he kills people, murders them, murders other children just for crossing him. And although there are lots of both scholars and other readers trying to defend Jesus's moral character in this text due to the fact that on occasion he does heal people. His healing is mostly, again, just to show that he can do things, and it's not out of mercy or pity for his victims. So this is very much part of a more Hellenic and Greco-Roman conception of God, but it is probably it's certainly by a Christian writer, written by a Christian writer, but very likely also one with a Judaic background. So there's no real question that we can't separate with a scalpel something like Judaic versus Hellenic culture. It's all one mixed bag. Now, I'd love to get into the nitty-gritty of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, but in this session, I will only give a brief introduction. Hopefully, sometime down the road, I can give a proper full treatment of this text. It is the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, but Thomas really isn't a character. It's an infancy gospel because it treats Jesus between the ages of 5 and 12. He's not really an infant, but he's more like a young boy, up to the point where he's a preteen. And obviously, this is material that's filled in from other gospels. Other gospels don't treat the youth of Jesus, but we see that in classical biographies, you did try to treat the youth of Jesus or of your hero if you could. And so this is sort of Christians updating the biography of their hero. In terms of the date and provenance, I won't make any arguments here, but most people want to place it in Syria in the 2nd century. If you want to read this text in translation, you can pick up Ehrman and Plesha's The Apocryphal Gospels, also J.K. Elliott's The Apocryphal New Testament. A Greek text can be found in Tony Burke's De Infantia Iesus, and a key study is writer Asgard's The Childhood of Jesus. So there's lots that you will also find online and through library searches. It's important to keep in mind that this is not a Gnostic gospel. It never was. It never claimed to be. And it doesn't really have any strong relation to the Gospel of Thomas either. So keep those things in mind as you read this text. Should only take you 10-20 minutes. It's a great read. Now, for those of you who read or will read Iesus Deus, you know that I go through several comparanda, that is, I look and compare several stories with the stories that appear in the Infancy Gospel, but I'll focus here on just two, the first being Jesus and Heracles. And if you pick up Iesus Deus, you can see where I cite Greco-Roman stories and traditions about Heracles as a young boy going through the traditional education that a young boy would and learning how to play the lyre, which is a musical instrument. And Heracles was not the brightest of students. He was no natural at music. And his teacher Linus, supposedly a brother of Orpheus, got frustrated with Heracles, and Heracles got equally frustrated, took up his instrument and cracked it over the head of Linus, killing him instantly. And as a result, Heracles was put on the farm, and no one was allowed to bring him back to the city because his father realized he was dangerous. In the Infancy Gospel, Jesus goes through the equivalent of grammar school. He has several teachers. who try to teach him the alphabet, and Jesus will have nothing to do with it, demanding that he, as the wisdom and logos of God, should be teaching them the alphabet, which is of course right, but how would a teacher understand that? Um, Jesus' second teacher is the unfortunate one. Jesus gets so angry at him when he uses corporal punishment, which was standard for teachers in those days and really far into the 20th century. When Jesus' teacher hits him over the head, Jesus kills him. And Joseph, Jesus' so-called father, then tries to quarantine Jesus and expresses real serious concern when Jesus, like Heracles, shows absolutely no remorse for defending his own honor in front of his teacher, resulting in death with, unfortunately, no resurrection in sight. The other example, perhaps better known to most of you, is the example of Pentheus in Euripides' play The Bacchae, and or I should say Dionysus in interaction with Pentheus. Dionysus being the god, of course, god of wine and a young god, who knows that his mother from the city of Thebes has died when he was still an infant, in fact, still in the womb, but that's another story. But he returns to his mother's hometown and essentially meets the mayor of the city, a very uptight character called Pentheus, whose name is associated with mourning. Now, Pentheus is actually Dionysus's cousin because Pentheus is the son of one of Dionysus's mother's sisters. So they are related, and Pentheus will have none of the what he thinks of as effeminate tricks of Dionysus, who gives Pentheus at least 3 or 4 chances to wise up when he sees the miracles of the god. But when Pentheus doesn't get it, Dionysus arranges for his aunts to go crazy and tear Pentheus limb from limb. Now, obviously, in terms of the details, there's nothing similar in the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, but when you look at the structure of a narrative, I think there are some interesting overlaps. So Jesus, as a young child, when he plays by the riverbed, he makes little clay birds, and he does this on the Sabbath. And to prove that this is perfectly legitimate, he claps his hands and makes the clay birds into living birds, which proceed to fly away. But Annas' son, Annas being the high priest, comes up to Jesus as the enforcer of convention and informs him that his little playing in the mud is not permissible on the Sabbath, which is technically wrong, but at any rate, Jesus gets very frustrated, and with a mere word, a curse, he is able to wither his young child opponent, and the son of the high priest dies there instantly. And what I want to draw out here is that, again, these child gods expect other people to see the miracles. In Jesus's case, it's the making of clay birds live. And for Dionysus, it's getting out of prison and, and intoxicating an entire city. So those who see the miracles ought to respect the gods, but when that respect doesn't come, the gods respond with violence. And this is the common structural parallel that I try to bring out. So to sum up my argument, I argue in this chapter that Jesus doesn't act up simply because he's a child. I mean, let's face it, he goes far beyond acting up. He is a monster of sorts and a pitiless one. And the way we can understand this is he is acting out of his divine nature to protect his honor. Now, this is not the divine nature of a Platonic deity who is unjealous and serene and peaceful and transcendent. This is the behavior of a God who is very much physically present, or a son of God who is interacting in the world just as gods like Heracles and Dionysus did, the sons of Zeus. So, what is this author modeling his conception of child deity behavior on? Well, it seems to be these more popular tales of Greco-Roman theology. And the author appears to assume that his audience didn't much differ in their expectations as to how a child God would act. So whether you're talking to a Christian audience or a more broadly Hellenic one, it really didn't matter. And when it came to filling in the blanks for how Jesus as a child would act, he acts pretty much like other child Greco-Roman deities acted. He is himself a Mediterranean deity, and he acts like one. So the author of the Infancy Gospel obviously is not supporting a philosophical portrait of God. He's not like Justin Martyr or Clement of Alexandria. But this doesn't mean that his depiction of Jesus was uneducated or out of tune with Greco-Roman culture. No, it was very much in tune with Greco-Roman culture, but at a certain stratum, I should say, and it interested probably not the stringent philosophical readers, but a sort of middle range of readers Christian readers who were on the same social level as those reading Greco-Roman novels and Greco-Roman mythography handbooks. So that's the argument, and there has been some good reception of it. I won't get into that here. For now, I will just say thank you to everybody for watching. Again, I've left some bibliography for those who want to read this gospel in a previous slide. I hope that all of you will follow it up and read the chapter in Iesus Deus for yourselves and let me know what you think. Till we meet again, everybody, thank you again and take care.